Okay, so we have started recording our meeting, and I've got several announcements that I'd like to do, and I've got kind of an order here that we want to do it in. So bear with us. But first of all, many of you can't see all of us, but we have 4 SHPO staff that are in one conference room. We are spaced apart. We're in our building where our office is. So we are safely practicing social distancing, and we have John Disher here from our office, and many of you have not met him yet. He is our grants and communications manager, and we wouldn't be here right now doing this Skype meeting without John. So just want to give a big shout out to John for getting us to this point in a really short period of time. As you all probably know, a lot had to happen to make this happen and to continue with this meeting through a virtual platform. So thank you, Mary. Mary said, "Yay, John." So I want to make sure, and everyone here, we have Michelle Decker here, and we have Dennis here, and myself, Amy Spong. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer. So welcome all of our board members and the public and guests for attending. Just want to ask for everyone's patience and for being flexible with us. And I think it's great that we are able to continue with this work and continue with this meeting during the state of emergency. I heard from several other SHPO offices who did not have state authority to hold virtual meetings in order to meet the open meeting laws, so they had to actually cancel several of their board meetings. So I'm going to just go through. So first, the first thing I'm going to do is just give a few reminders out to folks before we do roll call. So please look and see, make sure that your microphones are muted. That's an icon, one of the circle icons. It looks kind of like a microphone at the bottom of the screen. It is hard for feedback and noises, extra noises. So if you can make sure that you mute your microphone when you're not speaking, that would be great. Then you have to remember to unmute it when you do want to speak. And when you do speak, please state your name ahead of that. Skype will show everyone who is speaking, but do remember that these minutes are the meeting is going to be recorded. So for the folks that have to keep this record, and this is our main record. If we have to go back to it, we want to make sure that we know whose voices everyone's is, for Michelle to be doing minutes and that type of thing. And then also, if you haven't used it or located your chat, there's a circle icon in the lower left corner that has a chat function, and Lindsay Dyer says she's here from the middle of Wisconsin and her connection is good. So glad to hear that, Lindsay. So I'm going to be trying to kind of help guide this meeting along, but also I'm going to be tracking those chats. And so if you do have a question and you don't want to interrupt someone or the presenter, please use that chat, and you can just do Q+ if you've got a question, and then I will call on everyone. Okay. Are there any questions just with that information? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on to the next group of announcements that I've got. So let's see. First of all, I was just going to start off. Our colleagues over in the Office of Grants Management had another large Skype meeting earlier today, and one of their very first tips I'm going to share with you all in these uncertain times that we're all dealing with. Their very first tip was, let's all extend patience, grace, and space during this unprecedented time. And so I just thought that was good advice. And we're all practicing that here as a team and with our colleagues in the state. So I just want to reinforce that we're trying hard to be patient. We're learning new things, and we know you are too. So really appreciate everyone's effort in this and openness to try this as a new tool. So the next thing I'm going to do is yeah, John, I can address that a little bit. I was going to kind of forgo some general announcements, but I can certainly bring that up. So the first thing that I'm going to do next is I'm going to take the official roll call, and then I'm going to. We've got someone trying to call in, so let's see. You want to answer it? Do we know who it is? I think it's on there. Is there a button over there?
Oh, yeah.
Hold the line, please. I have an important call for this number.
Okay, false alarm. Okay, we had a call on the conference line, and I think it was a false alarm. Okay, so in order to get the meeting started, I'm going to take a roll call. And I'm going to call out the name first. We're going to go to the board member names. And then I just need you to state that you are present. And that's one way to know that we can both hear each other, that you can speak and we can hear each other. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to ask for members of the public. And I can read off the names for the people that I know are here from the public. And then if I've missed anyone else, then they can also state their name. And that's another way for us to verify that we can hear them and they can hear us. So again, I think someone might not have their mic muted. Just a friendly reminder throughout the meeting. We'll continue to do that. Okay, so I'm going to start with the roll call for board members. And be sure to take your microphone off mute and just state that you are present. Kristen Anderson, our chair.
I'm here.
Pam Brunfeld. Not present. John Decker.
I am present.
Lindsay Dyer.
I am present.
Elliot James.
Present.
Philip Koski.
Present.
Andrea Lavasser.
I'm here.
Thank you. Rob Mann.
Present.
Steve Olson.
Present.
Chris Schulke.
Present.
Kate Solomonson.
Present.
John Stark.
Present.
Mary Warner.
Present.
Frank White. Frank, are you here?
I am here.
Thank you. All right, next I'm going to go to our public members. And I'm going to see who we've got here. So there's someone, who, not sure, Janos? Do you want to state your name? Oh, okay, no microphone, but here. Can you type in your full name so we know who you are? Okay, I'm going to wait for that one, and then I'll make that. Oh. I'm sorry, I'm reading on a very small screen. Yano Smith. Is it O-H-I-E?
It's MC.
Oh, Nagai, thank you very much. Okay, appreciate that. And Lauren Anderson, do you want to?
I'm present.
Thank you. Luke Sims?
Present.
Thank you. Peter Shortridge?
Present.
Rachel Peterson?
Present.
And Tamara?
Present.
Great. Is there anyone else that is, I don't think we've made it, no one's made it on the call. Anyone else that I missed from the public? Oh, Andrew Schmidt, I'm sorry. Andrew, are you here?
There we go. Yes, I'm present.
Wonderful, thank you. Sorry I missed you right at the top there.
It's okay.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. The next thing that I am going to do, keep bearing with me. I might get tired of my voice by the end of the night. So I'm going to read the state's open meeting requirements during a state of emergency. I'm going to read that and the requirements, and then I'm going to ask the board to make a motion that allows this body, the board, to make a determination that we can do this virtual meeting in lieu of an in-person meeting. So I'm gonna just read this statement for everyone, and if you have any questions, we can certainly open it up for questions as well. So public bodies are required to comply with the open meeting law also during a state of an emergency. However, the Minnesota legislature has considered the challenges of such public meetings. And there is a Minnesota statute section 13D.021, subdivision 1, which permits public bodies to hold meetings via telephone or other electronic means if the conditions of the section are met. Section 13D.021 requires a public body to make a determination that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of a health pandemic or an emergency declared under Chapter 12. The governor has declared an emergency under Chapter 12. So requirements for holding a meeting via telephone or other electronic means include all participating members can hear one another. And we've just done that and verified that through everyone with the roll call and the and microphones. Members of the public at the physical meeting location can hear all discussion unless attendance at the regular meeting is not feasible due to the health pandemic. So we have made a decision that we have just staff here in the office for safety reasons, and the members of the public and the board are all in their own spaces. Number 3, at least one member of the public body is present at the meeting location unless unfeasible due to the health pandemic. So we have made that decision as well. We did talk about having our chair be here, but we felt it was safer to just have staff. So we have that ability to not have to allow a public member at the main meeting location. And then finally, all votes are taken by roll call, which we will be doing on each item. To the extent practical, public bodies should allow the public to monitor the meeting remotely pursuant to subdivision 3 of that section. And so we did place the Skype link on our website. We also have the phone number, however, that was made available as a backup. However, we are having trouble on that. So I do want to just document that. John right now is working on reaching out to that member of the public that was that was needing to, oh,
He's on there.
oh, he's here? Okay, let's see. We do have the, let's see, do we know their
It
names?
was Peter.
Peter Shortridge?
Mhm.
Oh, okay, Peter is here. Okay, so that was the only other person that, so far that we knew that was trying to get in via the phone conferencing line. So John will continue to track that during the meeting if there are any additional public members that are having trouble with a phone line or a Skype. So we will continue to monitor. We may have to advise folks to put in written testimony, and we'll try to do our best tracking those types of, possibilities as well. And we'll give that a go. So right now, I would ask the board to make a motion that we are required, that basically that they're making a determination that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent during this state of emergency.
Chris Schulke, I so move. I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Board Member Frank White, I will second.
Thank you. Kristen, would you like to call for the Chair
Okay.
Anderson?
All those in favor, we'll do this by roll call, I guess. Isn't that right, Amy?
Yes.
Okay. So in the order that I have you on my list, John Stark,
Aye.
Philip Koski,
Aye.
I vote yes. Kate,
Aye.
Elliot,
Aye.
Andrea,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Frank,
Aye.
Lindsay,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
John Decker,
Aye.
Mary Warner.
Aye.
Okay, Amy, back to you, I guess, huh?
All right, thank you. So the motion passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone. Okay, I don't have any additional announcements. I know if we look at our agenda, the first item is if there's any announcements by State Preservation Office staff. I'm going to forego any typical announcements. I know Board Member Stark did ask me to mention the sunset date for our state historic tax credit program that sunsets in June of 2021. And there were there was a bill in the State House and the State Senate that were, there was one hearing in the House before the state of emergency, and it did get a hearing. But as many of you probably know, the legislature is in formal recess right now, and there potentially isn't going to be much movement with the items that were kind of moving through the state legislature. So that is something that we were working on. Well, not necessarily working on, but we were tracking and following with the legislature before the COVID-19 and the state of emergency. So I think that's all I'm going to say at that point, because a lot has changed since we were there was a hearing with the taxes committee in the House 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it right in early March. So there was some good discussion and good questions that came up about the program, but I think it's going to be kind of different moving forward for the legislature here on out at this point. So, okay, I'm going to just ask SHPO staff here if they have any questions. Oh, and I'm sorry, I did forget to mention that Ginny Way is not able to attend tonight. So you get to hear Dennis for all of the presentations, which I know you're really you're all happy about. So anyway, I apologize, I did forget to mention that, but I'm just going to turn to my colleagues here in the room and see if there's anything I might have missed or if they wanted to add any announcements. All right, I'm seeing heads shaking no, so.
David online.
Oh yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't see David there, but we also have a fifth staff person who is logged in, David Mather. Hi, David.
Hi, everybody. I'm upstairs in Marion.
Yes,
Nice.
practicing our social distancing. So,
You find me here.
so thanks for tuning in, David. Appreciate it. Go ahead. Okay. Are any board members have any questions before we move to the formal meeting? Okay, I'm not seeing any members of the public. Do you have any questions? Okay. All right, so Kristen, I'm going to turn it to you, our chair, and I think we still want to move forward with your typical introduction and also the introduction of board members and their specialty area, so I'll turn it over.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board for the National Register of Historic Places. My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm currently chair of the review board. The board's purpose this evening is to consider the nomination of properties to the National Register of Historic Places. As most of you know, the National Register is a federal list of those places deemed worthy of preservation. A nomination form has been completed for each of the properties that will be considered tonight. Each nomination form has been sent to the review board members, and each member has had an opportunity to study it prior to this meeting. The owners of nominated properties, local officials, and interested local groups have been notified of this meeting. All have been invited to send written comments about the nomination and to attend this meeting. Some of you may wish to speak this evening about a particular property. You are welcome to do so, and I encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether that property meets the criteria of significance of the National Register. These criteria are the standards against which the review board will evaluate the nominations. This evaluation is the board's only assignment. These criteria have been established by federal regulation. Copies of the criteria have been sent to owners of nominated properties and to other parties I mentioned earlier. A description of the National Register program has also been sent to them. Each of the nominations will be presented by a staff member. Dennis. Persons viewing the meeting remotely will then be given an opportunity to comment. These comments should be limited to 3 minutes. The State Historic Preservation Review Board will then discuss the nomination, and a vote by the board will follow. Should a nomination be determined this evening to meet the criteria for inclusion in the National Register, the nomination will be forwarded to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong. Should she agree that the property meets the criteria and that the nomination is in proper form, she will sign the nomination and forward it to the National Register office in Washington, D.C., where it will be reviewed once more. The process is a lengthy one, but it is calculated to subject each property to rigorous evaluation. Before we begin, I'd like to ask the members of the State Historic Preservation Review Board to introduce themselves, briefly stating the role they fill on the review board and their particular expertise. And I will go through the list alphabetically this time, so there shouldn't be too many surprises for you, and that means I start. My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm an architectural historian, and I teach art history and architectural history at Augsburg. Next is Pam. She's not here. And then John Decker is third.
John Decker, member at large, semi-retired archivist.
Okay, and then Lindsay is next.
Hi, Lindsay Dyer, member at large, librarian, archivist, public history.
Thank you. Elliot, you're next.
Hi, Elliot James, historian, assistant professor of history at University of Minnesota Morris.
Thank you. Philip?
Philip Koski, historical architect. I'm a practicing architect.
Thank you. Andrea?
Andrea Lavasser, I am a prehistoric archaeologist, and I am retired from the Chippewa National Forest.
And Rob is next.
Rob Mann, I'm a historical archaeologist, associate professor of anthropology at St. Cloud State University.
Steve Olson.
My name's Steve Olson. I am a member at large, and I am a licensed civil engineer.
Thank you. Chris, you're next.
Chris Schulke. I'm a member at large. I am a public historian, executive director at the Otter Tail County Historical Society.
Thank you. Kate.
This is Kate Solomonson. I'm an architectural historian, and I teach architectural history at the University of Minnesota in the School of Architecture.
Thank you. John Stark.
I'm John Stark. I'm a historical architect, and I am a practicing architect.
Mary Warner.
I'm Mary Warner. I'm a member at large, and I'm executive director of the Morrison County Historical Society.
Thank you. And Frank.
Frank White. I'm a member at large, and I'm a historian.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, everybody. The next thing we need to do is to approve the minutes from the November 12th meeting. Are there any comments, changes about the minutes as you have them from your packet? Do we have a motion to approve?
This is Mary Warner. Oh, I was going to say, this is Mary Warner. I'll move.
Thanks, Mary. Is there a second?
This is Kate Solomonson. I'll second.
Thank you, Kate. Any other discussion? All right, another roll call. Let's see if I can do this in alpha order. It's easiest so that you know when they're coming up next. I vote yes. Pam's not here. John Decker.
Yes.
Lindsay Dyer.
Aye.
Elliot James.
Yes.
Philip.
Yes.
Andrea.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Steve.
Aye.
Let's see. Chris.
Yes.
And Kate.
Yes.
I'm looking for number 12. Let's see. That's the S is John. There you go, John. Start.
There you go. Aye.
And we're at the W's. Mary.
Aye.
And Frank.
Aye.
Thanks very much, everyone. So, Dennis, it's your turn, right? And we're starting with the Thief River Falls Auditorium and Municipal Building.
Yes, we are. And I just asked you guys to bear with me a little bit tonight because on some of these properties, I'm trying to bring up my image right now. 3 of the properties are Jenny's. She was going to present those tonight, and her absence was a little sudden. So as far as questions go, it's going to be, I'm probably not going to be able to answer some of those questions, but if you do have questions, if you could pass those to us, perhaps it'll be one of those things where, we can pass a nomination pending that the question be addressed. So I ask for your patience there. But I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Can you guys see me all right? Can someone see me?
You see this is Lindsay. I see the presentation, but not you personally.
Let's see here.
Will automatically pop up because he's using our conference.
Oh, sure. Okay. So it doesn't look like that's going to work.
Okay.
Because of the sound issues we had.
Okay, everybody, it doesn't look like that's going to work. It doesn't, my image is not going to pop up because of some of the technical issues that we had. So that's all right. We want to see the PowerPoint anyway. Okay, so our first one is Thief River Falls Auditorium and Municipal Building, and that's in Thief River Falls, Pennington County. And the author is Andrew Schmidt of Streamline Associates. This property's nomination was sponsored by the Minnesota Cultural and Historical Grants Program. Constructed in 1934, the Thief River Falls Auditorium and Municipal Building, locally known as the Auditorium Building, was designed by Raymond Gager in the classical modern mode of the Art Deco style. Located on the southwest corner of Main Avenue North and 2nd Street West in downtown Thief River Falls, the Auditorium Building is within a cluster of historic period civic buildings. And pictured here is the primary facade, and our camera is looking west. The Auditorium Building is 2 stories in height with a raised basement, and most of the interior floor plan is encompassed by the auditorium space. Some of its significant stylistic features are apparent in the symmetrical facade, the recessed stone paneled entrance bay, the vertically stacked window openings with patterned brick spandrels, and a combination of classical and geometric motifs. And here we are seeing a few of the architectural details of the facade. The bas relief on the right and the stone panel center bay on the left. The camera is facing west for both of these photographs. The building reflects the prevailing architectural style for public buildings during the 1930s. Built as a municipal building in 1933 without federal relief funding or labor, the Auditorium Building is an early example of the Art Deco style that is often associated with federal relief projects. The building was a digital landmark in the city at the time of its construction, and it remains so to the present day. And on the left is the North 3rd Street elevation. Our camera there is facing southeast. And on the right is a detail of that same elevation. The camera is facing east. From its opening in 1934 through the next several decades, the Auditorium Building provided a spacious auditorium gymnasium, city offices, and meeting rooms. The building was the site of most city functions, including the city clerk, the municipal court, with a courtroom and judges' chambers, and the police department, which had an office and jail cells. Here we see the primary east facade along Main Avenue. Our camera there is facing northwest. In addition to housing city offices, the building hosted the meetings of the city council and several civic groups, had dedicated meeting space in the basement. In 1936, the building was designated as the polling place for all 4 city wards. On the right, we see the north elevation along 3rd Street, cameras facing northwest. On the left is the building from the same perspective, circa 1970. The interior of the building is divided into 2 distinct spaces, the lobby and offices in the east section and the auditorium and stage in the middle and west sections. Art Deco motifs at the interior include zigzag and sunburst detailing, vertical fluting, and stylized floral patterns. On the left is the south elevation, camera facing northwest. On the right is the interior of the entrance lobby. The camera there is facing northeast. The Auditorium Building was regularly used for basketball, theater performances, dances, banquets, and conventions. It was the only space of its kind in the city until the new high school opened in 1938. And it remained the primary indoor venue for non-school functions through the 1960s. On the left is a detail of the door surround for the entrance to the city clerk's office. On the right is a detail of the entrance lobby crown molding. Here are some additional interior photos. On the right is the balcony seating of the auditorium looking west. On the left is police department jail cells looking north. The auditorium is a 2-story equivalent, 86 by 65 foot space that is used for music and theater performances, as well as basketball and volleyball. A raised stage is located at the west end, and upper level balcony seating is along the northeast and south. Here are two views of the auditorium. On the right, the camera is facing southwest, and on the left, the camera is facing west toward the stage. The basement of the building consists of a lobby area, a hallway with meeting rooms, and an assembly room with a kitchen. Here we see the basement community room, camera looking northeast. Our period of significance is 1934 to 1969. The level of significance is local. The National Register criteria is A and C, and the areas of significance: architecture, politics and government, and entertainment and recreation. The period of significance begins with the year the Auditorium Building was constructed and ends in 1969, in accordance with National Park Service guidance. The significance of the property continued into the 1970s, and no other appropriate end date could be determined. The Thief River Falls Auditorium and Municipal Building is a well-designed example of the classical modern style. It was a location of city government from 1934 through the 1970s, and was a primary entertainment venue for the city into the 1960s. For these reasons, it is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. And there is no correspondence that has been received for this property.
Thank you, Dennis. Is there anyone who would like to speak about this nomination? Anyone from the public like to speak about this nomination? Okay, anybody on the review board who would like to make comments or have any questions about this?
This is Andrea Lavasser, and I just have a sort of a housekeeping comment here. In section 8, page 2, the very first paragraph there's a sentence that begins with "however, within a few years had moved the city offices into the new city building." And I think there's a word missing in that sentence, that's all.
Did you get that, Dennis?
And then we have board member Steve Olson with the question.
Yeah, Steve Olson here. Dennis, and I know you may not be able to answer this one, but it's more of a philosophical question. The nomination talks about the railroad and agricultural development of the state. That context is part of the significance of the nomination, and the nomination certainly talks about a couple railroads in town and that they were very important in town, but I wasn't able to draw a line from the context to this building in particular, and so should there be a line sort of demonstrating how the context fits with the property?
Generally, yes, Steve, but it could be, without having read the nomination myself, it could be that the author of the documentation was just providing extra information. But Steve, that's something I'll definitely take a look at, and I can have a conversation with the author, and we can figure out whether or not that should really be there.
Okay, thanks, Dennis.
Andrew Schmidt here. I was the author of the nomination. If I may address.
Absolutely, Andrew.
Yes, thanks, Andrew.
And yes, Dennis, that was exactly the case. There's not necessarily direct connection between the railroads and the auditorium building. It was more general background information for the development of the city. And so its association is not with the historic railroads.
Thanks, Andrew. Anybody have any other questions, either for Andrew or otherwise?
Yeah, this is Board Member Stark. question, and just reading through there, it mentioned Gauger was the architect for this, but it didn't say precisely that he was from St. Paul, although his father was from that area. And in another nomination, that same thing came up, same name. And I saw that. I was just curious if that could be clarified.
I will definitely find out, John. John, do we know, are you saying that we know that he was from St. Paul, or we just need to find out if that's true?
It was either in this one or in the, what was the other, the Farmers Union Grain Terminal one also mentions his name as a possible architect for it, but it mentioned that his father had an architectural firm in St. Paul for years, and he worked for his father, but it didn't say that his own firm, as it continued, where that was. I assume it would be St. Paul, but it doesn't clarify that.
Okay, I'll find that out.
Thank you. That's it.
Yes, and Andrew here, and that's my understanding that he was in St. Paul, but it's probably worth double checking.
And this is Amy Spong. I just want to note too that board member Warner has another minor edit in section 8, page 6, first paragraph, line 11. Widows should read windows. Good catch.
You know, if I could just make one quick suggestion, any of these, the editorial things that we have, of course, we want to catch those because we want to send the best nomination we can to the National Park Service. But is it possible for you folks to send me those via email? And we can just sort of move on and not stop on those. But please send those to me via email or give me a call or scan the nomination and send it to me because I'll definitely take care of that stuff.
Hearing yes. Yes, they can do that.
Oh, thank you.
Again, this is Amy. I'll just add too that I think that works great for those edits. But if something does change the meaning or the significance, then we do need to have that discussion during the meeting, yes, which you all probably know.
Is there anything else? I see Lindsay is typing. I'm not sure what.
Board Member Decker.
Yes, John.
Andrew, I really enjoyed reading your registration, and the interior, particularly the gymnasium, the auditorium, reminded me lots of Wilmer's City Auditorium. It's very similar. Good job.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, this is John Stark again. I just want to say the bones of this building are still there, and with the exception of the windows on the outside and the front steps, the inside seems to have a lot of integrity still here, and there's hope for this building. So whatever they're going to do with it in the future, I wish them luck.
Are we ready for a motion?
Board Member Scholke, I'd like to make that motion to accept this to be on the National Register.
Thanks, Chris. Is there a second?
I will second it. This is Board Member Decker.
Thank you, John. Any other discussion? All right, here comes the roll call, alphabetical order. Kristen says yes. John Decker?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Aye.
Elliot?
Yes.
Philip?
Sorry, yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Steve?
Aye.
Chris?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
John Stark?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And Frank?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And now, Dennis again for the Sigurd Olson Writing Shack in Ely.
Yes, okay, so this is the Sigurd F. Olson Writing Shack, Ely, St. Louis County. The authors are Rachel Peterson, Hess Royce and Company, and William E. Stark of Stark Preservation Planning, LLC. The Sigurd F. Olson Writing Shack is a simple, rectangular building built for use by Sigurd, commonly known as Sid Olson. Olson was a nationally renowned conservationist, nature writer, and interpretive naturalist. He penned numerous articles and books, convincing many of the importance of protecting the wilds. And here we're looking at the north facade and the west end. Our view is to the southeast. The building is located in the southwestern section of Ely, a northwestern Minnesota community located on the Vermilion Iron Range. It might be a little difficult to see, but in that left photo, you can see where that yellow pin is. So that's the location of the Olson Writing Shack. The Writing Shack is only a short distance southeast of the Olson family's longtime residence. And we can see that at right, that's the photo key at right, but you can see the residence, and just to the southeast of that is the small Writing Shack. Constructed as a single-car garage circa 1928, the building was converted into a writing studio in 1937. Resting on a concrete foundation, it is wood framed and covered in drop siding. The roof of the side gabled building is covered in asphalt shingles. And at left, we're looking at the north facade and the east end, and our view there is to the southwest. And at right, we're looking at the south side. The view is to the east. The interior is composed of a single space with walls covered in wood paneling. It also has a wood floor and ceiling. A wide window marks each wall. Sig Olson's typewriter rests atop his desk near the northeast corner of the space. And at left, we're looking at the northeast portion of the interior. Our view there is to the northeast. And then at right, we're looking at the west half of the writing shack. The view there is to the west. Olson wished for the site around his writing shack to reflect the northern Minnesota landscape. He planted many red pines and numerous other plants. He also built a low stone wall along the tree line and south property line. A fire grate was incorporated into the wall, and a break in the wall allows access to a footpath through the pines. There's no formal design to the wall other than Olson wished it to look like a natural wall of gathered stones. And at left, we're looking at the low stone wall. Our view there is to the northeast. And at center, we're looking at the fire grate within the stone wall. View there is also to the northeast. And at right is the trail to the property, and that's the view to the south. Olson began his conservation efforts in the 1920s, and while he addressed numerous conservation issues and lobbied many politicians and others, he is best known for his efforts to preserve from development pressures the Quetico Superior region, a 14,500 square mile area reaching from Minnesota into Ontario, which includes the 1,680 square mile wilderness commonly known as the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. The decades-long battle led to the Wilderness Act of 1964. The struggle put Olson at odds with many in Ely, who felt his actions undermined livelihoods drawn from the land. Before passage of the amendment to the Wilderness Act in 1978, he was hung in effigy. Olson longed to be a writer of note, but success in this arena proved elusive. For years, he instructed students in Ely in the sciences, lecturing at both the high school and community college, while submitting articles on wilderness subjects to various publications. Some were published, most were not, which often led to bouts of depression and self-doubt. Olson gave up teaching in the late 1940s, dedicating himself to his writing and conservation work. Long had he considered the move, fearful of the consequence of life's safe path. Quote, "I know my dream, know what I want to do, but it will die and I will continue doing the thing that is easy, live comfortably, and after a time give up entirely," he wrote. His big break arrived in 1956 with publication of his New York Times bestseller, The Singing Wilderness, a collection of essays on the natural world echoing in part his primary theme that we had stumbled, seemingly abandoning our inherent connection to nature, which needed to be reacquired. Other successful books and articles soon followed. After years of effort in his tiny writing shack, Sig Olson finally achieved his ambition. The period of significance is 1937 to 1982. The level of significance is national. The National Register criterion is B, areas of significance, conservation, and literature. And we also had to take into consideration here criteria consideration G. The period of significance begins with the conversion of the Olsons' single-car garage into a writing studio in 1937 and continues to Sig Olson's death in 1982. The end date to events that make the writing shack historically significant is less than 50 years ago. For this reason, we must address criteria consideration G, which is exceptional importance. The writing shack is intimately tied to Olson's productive literary and conservation work. His writing and activism were of exceptional importance at the national level. Thus, the writing shack meets criteria consideration G. The humble building adjacent the Olson residence is where Sig Olson completed almost all of his major literary and conservation writings, including all 9 of his books. For this reason, the writing shack is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. And we do not have any correspondence with this.
Thank you, Dennis. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment on this? Anyone from the public? And I guess then we move on to questions and comments from the board.
Board Member White. Dennis, can you explain to me the criteria considerations of less than 50 years old? What does that mean?
Yeah, Frank, the National Park Service, the National Register has this rule that if the events that make a property historically important, if some of those events have not yet reached 50 years, so like Olson died in 1982, it's not quite 50 years, we have to address that criteria consideration and justify it. We basically have to justify it. And in this case, the period of significance runs from the writing shack, being converted into a writing shack to Sig Olson's death, because he was this nationally renowned person. And the fact that he was this nationally renowned person and highly influential conservationist, we got a pretty good case that we can justify the criteria consideration.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question or comment?
This is Mary Warner. I wanted to say that I really loved this nomination, partially because I'm a writer, partially because the story was so well told. So thank you, Rachel, for doing that. My question is concerning all of the items within the shack. I was just wondering if those have been inventoried in some way. I'm not sure what the future use will be for the shack, but if it's open to the public, I would be really worried about stuff walking off.
Rachel, are you able to address that?
Yeah, I can chime in. So the Writing Shack is now owned by the Listening Point Foundation. It's a non-profit dedicated to Sig Olson, and they have their offices out of the main Olson residence and then keep the shack on the property. So there's no plans to redevelop it or anything. You can take a tour by appointment, but it's not open to the public.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We also have Board Member Olson who has a question.
So this is another one for Rachel, I think. I saw in the nomination it talked about a chimney, and that had me curious for a garage. But then I looked at all the pictures, and I couldn't find any remnant of a chimney hole anywhere. Do you know if the chimney was inside or outside, Rachel?
I believe it was just like a little wood stove that vented to the outside, so I'm not sure it was like a brick chimney or anything. In the photo that's up on the top right here, there are those rocks in the foreground, kind of the lower right corner. the hole where that wood stove vented out is in the wall, just kind of out of frame on that side.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments?
This is Board Member Stark. This is one of those places I think we all wish we had right now as our seclusion or working. But what went on in this building and what he wrote was really significant, and saving the natural, our northern area, the boundary waters and all that was really important. So I really like this space and this nomination, and well written and everything. I actually started reading the Singing Wilderness, found it on eBay, or not on eBay, I found it on the library in something I could download to my Kindle, and it's interesting reading his writing and after having heard about what he does. So very worthwhile project.
Thanks, John. Anybody else?
This is Board Member Decker.
Hey, John, go ahead.
Hi. I just have to I'm saying kudos to the Wicks for having the foresight to keep a lot of the items in the interior. I think that's really kind of cool, and it's very rare. So I really thought that was really neat. So that's it.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah, this is Janos.
Hi, Janos.
Can you talk a little about why the house itself doesn't count as part of this nomination?
Sure. Janos, we initially, I had visited the site. I was actually up in Ely for a different property, but while we were there, a few of us from the SHPO swung by to take a look at this property. The house has been substantially altered, and so there wasn't going to be a way for us to make a case for historic integrity. But the writing shack had really, really good integrity, so we knew we could make the case for that.
Any other questions or comments? Are we ready for a motion?
This is Mary Warner. I move that we forward this on to the National Register.
Do we have a second?
Steve Olson seconds.
Thanks, Mary and Steve. Any other questions, discussion? All those in favor? Oh, wait, we don't do it that way, do we? Try it again. This is Board Chair Anderson. I vote yes. John Decker.
Yes.
Lindsay?
Aye.
Elliot?
Yes.
Philip?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Steve?
Aye.
Chris?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
John Stark?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And Frank?
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. And next, Dennis is back for the Winona Commercial Historic District boundary expansion.
So this is Amy Spong, and we're going to take a little pause right now. The author, Carol Zelli from Landscape Research, was unable to connect to Skype, and we do have an invalid conference call line that we haven't been able to fix. So we're going to call her so she can hopefully hear us, but it's going to be through just a cell phone. So bear with us. We're going to take a quick pause. Oh, we're going to do it on the, okay,
Yeah, speaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. We're back. Carol Zelli is on the line too, so she wanted to be able to listen to this presentation tonight as well. Okay, so this is indeed the Winona Commercial Historic District. It's a boundary expansion in Winona County, and it's the author is Carol S. Zelli of Landscape Research LLC. The Winona Commercial Historic District was listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1998. Curiously, two buildings adjacent to the district, both dating to the period of significance, which is 1868 to 1920, and contributing to why the district is historically significant, were left out. This National Register boundary expansion is meant to rectify that. At upper left, we see the boundaries of Winona's two commercial historic districts. The blue dotted line encapsulates the East 2nd Street Commercial Historic District, and the red line takes in the Winona Commercial Historic District. At bottom right is a closer view of a segment of the Winona Commercial Historic District. The red hashed line represents the boundary expansion to take in the two buildings. And so you see that just to the north there, you see that red hashed line. Those are the buildings right there. The two buildings include the Erpelding block, which we see at left. Our view is to the south at the north facade. And at upper right is the adjacent Weibel's Hotel. The small hotel is contiguous with the east wall of the Erpelding block. In the view, we are looking at the north facade, and our view is south. The Erpelding block was constructed in the 1870s and has had several additions, the last being in 1913. Weibel's Hotel was constructed in 1870 and has seen little significant alteration. Both buildings have a number of arched openings with window hoods. The small hotel also features a fanciful cornice. The 3-story Erpelding block was constructed by Peter Erpelding and housed a number of commercial and industrial entities over the decades, including a millinery, sorry, my mouth is going dry, and basement saloon. It also housed a grocery store and later an armory, which was used for indoor baseball and social gatherings. It became the A.M. Raymer Candy Company by the turn of the 20th century. Weibel's Hotel was built by Peter Weibel, a native of Switzerland. It became a place where sales travelers often stayed. The hotel closed in 1911, but Weibel and his wife Ursula continued to reside there for many years. And at left is the west side of the Erpelding block. Our view there is to the southeast. And at right is the west side and south rear of the building. Our view is generally to the east. At left is the west side of the Erpelding block. I'm sorry. Here we see the east side of the Erpelding block. We can also see a portion of the rear of Weibel's Hotel at far right. These are representative views of the Winona Commercial Historic District. At top left is the south side of East 3rd Street at the intersection of Franklin and Market Streets. Our view there is to the west. And at bottom left is the south side of East 3rd Street at the intersection of Walnut and Lafayette Streets. The view there is to the west as well. To the right is the Angers block, which is immediately to the rear of the Erpelding block, and the view there is to the east. The period of significance is 1868 to 1920. The level of significance is local. National Register criterion is A, and areas of significance are commerce and industry. The period of significance is the district's period of significance, which is 1868 to 1920, the period when the commercial character of downtown Winona had largely filled out. Surprisingly, the Erpelding block and Weibel's Hotel were left out of the Winona Commercial Historic District. As each one reflects the period of significance and represents the vitality of the district, which had largely filled out by 1920, each should be recognized as part of the district. Each is eligible for the National Register as contributing buildings to the district. And there is no correspondence with this.
Thanks, Dennis. Is there anyone who would like to make any comments about this nomination?
Well, this is Chris Schulke. I guess, the basic question is, we still don't have an explanation why it was left out, and why has it taken so long? I mean, is there any reason for that you found out?
Chris, it's a bit of a mystery to me too. I don't entirely understand why it was left out. I don't get it. It was unfortunately, it kind of predated me by a number of years, so I don't understand why it was left out. But it's right there. It's contiguous with the district, and so it's not like you're creating some kind of boundary that is contrived. It's right there, and it contributes to why the district is historically significant. And I know that some folks down in Winona were looking at this building as a potential tax credit project. And so that's when we started the discussion. Well, why isn't this in the district? Maybe we should be putting this in the district. It belongs there, at least in our perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Anybody else? Amy, is anybody writing anything?
I have nothing. Actually, thank you for reminding me. Yes, I do have a question from Janos, maybe because they faced a different street than the rest of the contributing properties. Oh, that's in response to the question of why, possibly why was it left out of the district prior?
And that is something I had thought about, maybe that was part of the thinking 20 years ago or 22 years ago. But it still didn't make any sense because, it's right there with the rest of the commercial buildings, and it contributes for the exact same reason that they do.
Other comments or questions?
This is Mary Warner. I was just wondering if there were any historic photos available of the buildings. I didn't see them in the nomination, so I was just wondering if there were just none available.
I know that Carol had done a lot of digging. Carol Zelli had done a lot of digging for this. And there wasn't much. I can recall one quite old photo when the building still had its mansard roof. And I'm not quite sure where I saw that now, but I know there was that one historic photo.
Thanks, Dennis.
Anything else?
We have Tamara Lunt is typing.
Thanks, Amy.
And again, just a friendly reminder while Tamara's typing is to check your mics that they're muted. So we have a comment from Tamara. The historic photo that Dennis is thinking of predates the 1913 edition and had some clear artistic license taken with words painted on the photo. Okay. And that's the response to the question about historic photos. And Mary says thanks.
Any other questions or comments before we move to a vote?
And Chair Anderson, I just want to make sure, I think as Dennis has been doing his presentation, he is mentioning whether or not there's any written testimony or not, but I just want to make sure I kind of missed that bypassed me the first couple items that I did hear Dennis state that right at the end of his presentation. So I think we're doing just fine for covering, but might want to, maybe ask one more time just to make sure that everybody who needs to speak or wants to speak on this, making sure that we're just covering that.
Sure. Yep. So that said, anyone else want to add anything at this point? And is there anyone ready to make a motion?
This is Board Member Stark. I'd like to make a motion to expand the district as noted.
Thank you, John. A second?
Board Member Schulke, second.
Thanks, Chris. Any other discussion? All right, then we'll vote. I vote aye. John Decker? John Decker, are you there?
I am, yes.
Lindsay?
Aye.
Elliot?
Aye.
Thank you. Philip?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
John Stark?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And Frank?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. And next we have Old Main, Mankato State Teachers College boundary reduction.
And let me just again stress here, this was one of my co-workers' nominations, Ginny Way, so I'm probably not going to have a lot of answers to questions, but if there are questions, I can certainly record those and find out those answers. Okay, so this is Old Main, Mankato State Teachers College and boundary reduction. It's Mankato, Blue Earth County, and the author is Dana Dullum. The Old Main Mankato State Teachers College was listed in the National Register of Historic Places May 19, 1983. At the time of listing, the property consisted of two buildings historically connected by a link. The annex, built in 1908, and Old Main, constructed in 1922 through 1924. In 1984, the annex was destroyed by fire and subsequently demolished. An original auditorium connected to the southeast elevation of Old Main was also demolished, circa 1987. These removals left Old Main as the only Mankato State Teachers College building previously listed and within the boundary. The SHPO is requesting a boundary reduction for the property pursuant to 36 CFR 60.14A2. The portion of the boundary that encompassed the annex lacks sufficient historic integrity to convey the significance of the property. In this case, the State Review Board and the National Park Service must decide two basic questions. Is the reduction of the boundary justified, and if so, does the property continue to be eligible for listing in the National Register? Located at 301 South 5th Street, Mankato, the Old Main building was designed by Clarence H. Johnston. The largely utilitarian building is well proportioned and boasts a Jacobean Revival tower at its primary entrance. While the annex and auditorium have been demolished, the Old Main building still stands much as it did at the time of listing. And here we see Old Main's primary facade, the camera facing southeast. The National Park Service lists the applicable criteria of the Old Main Mankato State Teachers College as, quote, event and, quote, architecture engineering, with education and architecture as the areas of significance. Old Main, excuse me, here we're looking at Old Main. Our camera is facing northeast. The annex was formerly located in the area at right of the photograph. The original nomination implied that the property was significant for its architecture, not as an example of the Jacobean revival style, but because it embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type of building, in this case Johnston's interpretation of the standard school building type of the period. These aspects, as well as the architectural detail of the style, are still extant. And this, again, is the Old Main building. Our camera's facing east. SHPO concludes that the continued listing in the area of architecture is justified despite the loss of the annex and auditorium. The original nomination describes the floor plan and general form of Old Main as H-shaped and utilitarian in design. These aspects of Old Main are reminiscent of Clarence H. Johnston's designs for other colleges and universities. And again, we're looking at Old Main, and we're looking to the west. The auditorium was formerly located between the two extensions seen here. Old Main's facade details, we have grotesques above the third story on the primary facade representing students, and our camera is facing to the southeast. The nomination further describes Old Main as the, quote, administrative, academic, and social center of the school. While the loss of the attached auditorium negatively affects the integrity of Old Main, the functions that are described in the nomination, classrooms, offices, campus radio station, bookstore, and student union, were likely held in extant parts of the building. SHPO concludes that the continued listing in the area of education is justified because the imposing building continues to serve as a, quote, reminder of the institution's history and as a symbol of the school's extensive contribution to education in the community and the state. So we're looking at the Old Main primary facade, and the camera is facing east. The period of significance is 1900 to 1924. The level of significance is local. The National Register criteria, A and C, and the areas of significance, architecture and education. Parcels once containing the demolished annex building do not retain sufficient integrity to convey their historic significance. Old Main, however, does retain sufficient integrity to convey both the education and architectural significance of the property as a whole. The extant portions of the building continue to display the, quote, creative Jacobean revival interpretation of the standard school building type of the period, end quote, for which the property is listed. On left is, that's a 1982 image, and we're looking at the northwestern facade of Old Main from the west. And on right, we're looking northeast along 5th Street South. That's the front facade of the annex in the foreground, and Old Main to the left. At left is the rear, the southeast elevation of Old Main from east, and the auditorium is at left of the image. At right is a tower detail of the primary facade. And we do not have any correspondence with this.
Thank you, Dennis. Is there anyone who would like to comment on this? Anyone from the public interested in making a comment about this? Or from the board? Comments or questions? Other than my dog, that is. She found me.
Yeah, this is board member Stark. Got a few questions. As a boundary reduction, I can understand looking at the pictures and the buildings are gone. Dennis, could you go back to the site of the boundary with an image?
Yeah, let me, is it this one, John?
So on the right, you can see there's some woods behind there, and the black line must be the old boundary, and your red line is the new one. And so you're reducing that, but that looks like it didn't change. So my guess is this is for future school development in the area, that they don't have to worry about a historic district or historic area, that they can develop the property tighter to this building. So that's my guess, but it would probably affect it a little bit. I have no problem with it. I just wanted to point that out, that I saw that. And then I assume the auditorium was small enough that the percentage demolition really doesn't affect the building at all. You've still got a lot of integrity in the building, and it looks fine. Does that reduction on the site, any thought on that, though?
Yeah, John, I'm sorry. I can't really offer a lot of information there, but I certainly can understand what you're saying. You know, that, if possibly there could be development there. But I do understand, with the absence of the buildings, why the boundary would be reduced.
Right. And I think it's the integrity of the space, even if they built buildings right up to it, would probably still be maintained because it's in a school, it's in the original location, all that kind of stuff. Other projects might be different. If this was a farm site in the middle of a small town someplace in Minnesota, it would be different. That's it.
Thanks, John. Other comments or questions? Anyone else? Comments or questions? Are we ready for a motion?
Board Member Scholke, I so move to accept the boundary reduction.
Board Member Solomonson, second.
Thanks, Chris and Kate. Any other comments or questions before we vote? If not, Kristen votes yes. John Decker?
Aye.
Lindsay?
Aye.
Elliot?
Aye.
Philip?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
John Stark?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And Frank?
Aye.
Okay, thanks everyone. And now the Laurel Apartments in Minneapolis. Dennis.
Okay, yes, this is the Laurel Apartments, Minneapolis, Hennepin County. The authors are Rachel Peterson and Jessica Berglund of Hess Royce and Company. The Laurel Apartments is a 4-building residential complex in the Queen Anne style. Each building has its own address, but its overall address is 15 North 15th Street. Our view here is of the south and east facade, and we're viewing to the northwest. The complex is located at the intersection of Laurel Avenue and North 15th Street, not far from the Basilica of St. Mary's, which is to the southwest. So you can see the yellow pin there. That's our building, and just to the southwest along Hennepin Avenue, there's the Basilica. Here we see an overhead of the 4 sections of the complex. Each building is attached, but these are only partial attachments. The curious attachment points create narrow light wells between the buildings. The Laurel Apartments was a creation of Septimus J. Bowler, a Londoner who found his way to Minneapolis in 1884 and established an architectural firm there in 1888. It may be his best residential work. The apartment house reveals sophistication in its design. The facades undulate, creating an irregular footprint, a common characteristic of the style. It is a heavy-looking building with its brick walls and stone foundation. Round arched entrances, some crowned with pediments, feature sandstone surrounds. A decorative cornice is accented in a few places with pediments and parapets, some of which feature blind arches. Apartments with fireplaces are evidenced by vertical brick coursing spanning the height of the building and terminating at chimney stacks. Windows are arched and rectangular with transoms. Lintels and sills are of sandstone. The Laurel Apartments developed when the streetcar line extended to the edges of Minneapolis. In the late 1800s, as Minneapolis was growing, various types of multifamily housing at the outskirts developed. This included row houses, many of which were quite fanciful and were occupied by upper classes. Other multifamily housing included tenement blocks, which typically housed working class families and laborers and did not have amenities found in many of the row houses. The Laurel Apartments was different, a multifamily housing unit that marked a middle ground between the fanciful row houses and the tenements. These were known as apartment houses, and in Minneapolis, they largely became popular around the 1890s. Apartment houses were geared more toward the middle classes, toward those that could not afford individual residences or the high-end row houses, and yet they were more than the usual tenement, offering larger unit sizes, elegant interiors, and handsome fireplaces and such. And at top left, we're looking at the south facade. Our view there is to the northeast. And at the middle is a detail of the arched entrance at the east facade. The view there is to the northwest. And at bottom right is a view of the east facade. The view is to the southwest. A number of apartment houses had been built in the Loring Park neighborhood by the 1890s, but the Laurel Apartments stood out. The apartment house represented the height of the property type, and just before the 1893 depression, when construction plummeted. Its complex footprint of recesses and protrusions reflected a kind of opulence and was plainly Victorian-inspired. Architectural historian Christine Hunter observed, quote, recesses and projections that add surface area to the building provide another way to increase the number of exposures and improve the light and air in each apartment. Not surprisingly, with the panic of 1893, apartment houses became more architecturally restrained. And at left is a view of the entrance to the light well at the east facade. Our view there is to the west. And at right, we are inside the light well. The view there is to the west. In both of these views, we are looking at the rear of the building and its many wood balconies. The view at left, we are looking to the east, and the view at right, we are looking to the southeast. Here are some interior shots. At top left, we're looking at the wainscoting in the stairwell. The view is to the northwest. The bottom middle is the tile floor in the entrance lobby. The view there is to the west. And at right is a stair balustrade and radiator. And the view is to the northeast. A view inside some of the apartments. At left is a built-in cabinet. At middle, we see a protruding bay with original wood trim. And at right is an original wood surround decorating a kitchen entrance. Many of the apartments have decorative fireplaces. Here are a handful of them. Note also the original wood flooring. The period of significance is 1893. The level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is C, and the area of significance is architecture. The period of significance is 1893, the year the Laurel Apartments was completed. Constructed in 1893, the Laurel Apartments in the northwest part of Minneapolis represented a premier apartment house. It offered an upscale impression, but was geared toward middle-class people. When the Depression of 1893 arrived, construction of apartment houses like the Laurel quickly became a rarity, which makes the Laurel unique. Located in a part of the city to which many were flocking by the late 19th century, the Laurel Apartments is an accent on the streetscape, adding a touch of historical elegance to its surroundings. As such, it is eligible for listing in the National Register. And we do not have any correspondence with this.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm sorry to say that I need to leave the meeting now, and Amy and John can take over, please.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Thanks.
I just want to make sure. Yeah. So, John, are you able to?
I've got it. Yep.
Wonderful.
I seem to have an echo here. That's interesting.
Great. So we'll make note. We'll make note in the minutes that Chair Anderson has left.
Okay, and this is co-chair board member John Stark. Is there any discussion on this from the public? Hearing none, or any board members have anything to say?
Hi, this is Lindsay Dyer. As Mary mentioned in one of the previous nominations, I'm looking for historic photos of this, wondering if there are any.
Rachel, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. We searched high and low for historic photos. There was one image where the Laurel was in the very background, about a block and a half back from the photo vantage point, but there aren't any historic photos of the building where you can actually make out any features.
Thanks, Lindsay. Any other comments?
This is Board Member White. I love the history in this application. It really was significant to me and Minneapolis. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Board Member White. I agree that it was very interesting, and the fact it was at the high end of it and what the economy did. Any other board members?
This is Mary Warner. It is apparent from the photos that it looks like there's no occupancy right now. What are the plans for these buildings?
Rachel, did you want me to answer that?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Dennis. That's fine.
My understanding, Board Member Warner, is that this will be, or it is currently, a tax credit project. So it will be reused, I assume, for apartments. Correct me if I'm incorrect, Rachel.
Nope, you're right. Yep, it's being redeveloped as apartments.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Just my own on this, I see some of these pictures like the built-in and the fireplaces. Those were kind of a kit of parts. You could order those from different areas because I recognize the same little styles here. So it's really nice to see that they've survived. If any other comments? If not, we'll move to a motion. Can I have a motion?
Board Member Schulke, I move that we pass the nomination on to the National Register.
Board Member Koski, second.
Thank you. We will go to a vote. I do not have them in alphabetical order, so I'm going to use the list that I have listed here. And it starts with me. So Board Member Stark votes aye. Board Member Koski?
Aye.
Anderson is gone. Board Member Solomonson?
Aye.
Board Member James?
Aye.
Oh boy, I'm going to mess your name up. Board Member Andrea?
Aye.
That's easier on first name. Board Member Rob?
Aye.
Board Member Chris?
Aye.
Board Member Frank?
Aye.
Board Member Lindsay.
Aye.
Board Member Steve.
Aye.
Board Member John Decker.
Aye.
And Board Member Mary.
Aye.
It's unanimous. This will move on. Thank you, everybody.
Chair Stark, or
yes.
Chair Stark, I have a question. I should have brought this up. You mentioned the fireplaces, and so my curiosity again is, since you and Philip are the architects here, how did they make the fireplaces happen in these different locations?
There is a central chimney behind here, and these are little wood boxes that are stuck in there. Sometimes they may have had gas to them. I don't think this would have had gas to it, though. It may have had a coal burning thing or something in there. But that, you can see where it bumps out in the wall. That's all masonry right behind that. And then it's just this wood mantle attached to it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. I love the fireplaces, as you had mentioned, and again, I should have probably brought it up, so I apologize for that. But I'm just curious again, because I have no idea in building design.
Chances are they won't be reused as fireplaces, just for life safety. Sometimes they would be back to back, and you can't see it in the elevation here, but there are chimneys, a series of them coming up through the roof there.
Thank you, Chair Stark.
Thanks, Frank. Dennis, it's all yours.
Before we move on, I just noticed this might be fixed on your agendas, but this property, Laurel Apartments, it's in Hennepin County. I noticed that it was on the agenda. It says Ramsey County. So I just wanted to make known that the Laurel Apartments is Minneapolis, Hennepin County.
All right. And it's correct on the nomination.
Okay, good deal.
John, Board Member Stark, should I go ahead and move forward?
Yes.
Okay, this is Jenny's last one that she has for the evening. This is Zinsmaster's Baking Company building, Minneapolis, Hennepin County, and the author is Rachel Peterson of Hess Royce and Company. The Zinsmaster Baking Company building is a former bakery at 2900 Park Avenue in Minneapolis. The building was designed by Charles W. Jarnett with influences from the collegiate Gothic and Art Deco styles. It is 3 stories tall at the southeast corner and steps down to 2 stories moving to the northwest. Constructed in 1928, the building was partially converted to apartments in 1987. And here we are looking at the primary east facade. The camera is facing southwest. During its period of significance, the Zinsmaster Baking Company building was constructed as a bread factory for its namesake company. This was the company's 5th plant and represented the height of the company's development. The new Minneapolis factory contained cutting-edge technology that improved production efficiency and made the facility one of the most advanced in the nation. Again, this is the primary facade, this time looking northwest, and the building is circa 1930 from this at the upper right from the same perspective. Zinsmaster's flagship plant also served as one of the company's best advertisements and communicated its commitment to cleanliness at a time when the public was skeptical of industrially produced food. Owner Harry Zinsmaster was acutely aware that industrial bakeries were still thought of as dirty places and offered tours of his factories to prove to the public that they were clean. These tours were also opportunities to show off the innovative machinery that filled the 3 floors of the building. And here are some examples of the primary facade details. And our camera is facing west for both photographs. The Zinsmaster Baking Company was proud of the amount of technology in its facilities. It regularly invested in new machines and was the first company to produce sliced bread using the new bread slicing machine in northern Minnesota. Company advertisements touted that, quote, Zinn's Master's butternut bread was clean, absolutely clean, because the factory was a new, modern sanitary bakery. And the products were, quote, wrapped in sanitary waxed, dust-proof paper by machines, end quote. On the left is the west elevation. Our camera is facing east. On the right is an interior photo of a bakery machine in 1929. Despite its history, there are concerns about the integrity of the Zinn's Masters Baking Company building. The National Park Service reviewed a Part 1 evaluation of significance. That is the tax credit program, just to clarify. For the building in November of 2019. A Part 1 is a historical documentation presenting essentially the same information found in a National Register nomination. It is employed by those wishing to participate in the historic preservation tax incentive programs. A Part 1 is a preliminary determination of eligibility for a building. In the case of the Zinn's Masters Baking Company, the National Park Service concluded that the property does not retain enough of its historic physical features to qualify for the National Register. The appeal to this decision is a formal National Register nomination, which is why we are seeing the property this evening. And pictured here is the primary facade and north elevation. The camera is facing southwest. Part of the Park Service's concerns are illustrated in this slide. The 1951 Sanborn map showing the building's footprint with the present day view. The building shaded in blue on the map has been demolished. The Park Service was also concerned about the change in wall material and addition of new incompatible window openings on the secondary elevations. These changes diminish the aspects of design, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association of the building. Here we see the north elevation, the camera looking southeast. Here are a few views of the interior. On the left, the first floor, which is a typical apartment bedroom. The camera is facing north. In the center is the third floor freight elevator. The camera, again, is facing north. And on the right, a first floor typical apartment kitchen camera is facing west. Also of concern to the National Park Service were the changes made to the interior of the building during the 1984 conversion to apartments. Contrasting the historic photo on the right with the present day view at the left illustrates the loss of the large open spaces and loss of the historic nature of the materials and design, all character-defining features of an industrial building. On the left is a view of a typical first-floor apartment living room, and the camera is facing southeast. And on the right is an interior view of the building in 1929. While the stairway and third floor remain intact, most of the first and second floor have been subdivided by apartments. Here we see the third floor former mixing room. The camera is facing southeast, and the main stair on the first floor, the camera is facing northwest. Additional views of the third floor on the right, the former mixing room, and we're looking north, and on the left is the former fermentation room, also looking north. The combination of the exterior and interior alterations is the reason the National Park Service declined the Part 1 application. Historic character-defining components of the building's interior are difficult to locate anywhere but the entrance lobby and third floor. Here is another example of the present interior. A first floor corridor at left, and then the historic interior at right. The period of significance for this property is 1928 to 1959. The level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is A, and the area of significance is industry. The property's period of significance runs from 1928, when the factory opened, through 1959, when Harry Zinsmaster stepped down as president of the company. And there is one piece of correspondence with this property. We received a letter from Minneapolis. Let me briefly read something to you. Says the Minneapolis Department of Community Planning and Economic Development, the CPED, on behalf of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission, who considered the nomination during a meeting on February 18th, 2020. The commission voted unanimously to move forward the staff recommendation that is outlined here. The Department of Community Planning and Economic Development staff recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt the CPED report, approve the National Register nomination for the Zinsmaster Baking Company building at 2900 Park Avenue South, and direct staff to transmit a letter summarizing the report to the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Officer. Finally, there is one last slide. The argument on behalf of the Zinsmaster Baking Company building is that the Minneapolis factory represents overarching themes of automation and mass production in the industrial baking industry. The building was planned and built to accommodate large machines that allowed for technological innovation to improve cleanliness and efficiency. For these reasons, the nomination states that the Zinsmaster Baking Company building is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. And that's all we have.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Can I ask a question? In this image here, you can see the non-contributing windows near the back on the white face of the existing photo. The old building, the old 1958, the building that's the portion that got torn down in that side, isn't it? Something in the far left of that image, but I don't see anything that's occurring in there either.
Boy, John, let me kind of look at this again here, see if I can tell.
Are you referring to the white portion?
Right.
That's on the current photo, and then there's really nothing in that location in the 1958.
Correct.
Okay. Or it's hard to tell, I think, what was going on in that photo.
If that's the area where it is, it doesn't seem significant, whatever was gone. So
I think Board Member Stark, I think you're correct. I think you're correct that we are looking at the part of the building that the National Park Service must have had trouble with. Rachel, are you there? Could you answer that?
Hi. Yep. So the kind of stucco white cladding was added during that redevelopment. The portion of the building that was demolished is actually on the north side, on the other side of this view, facing the rail corridor.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. We'll open this up to discussion. Anyone from the public like to say anything? If not, we'll open to the board members. Any board member comments?
This is Schulke, board member Schulke. I found this very interesting. This was a fascinating nomination because, let me see if I get this straight. The Park Service basically contradicted SHPO, correct?
In this instance, yes, the SHPO had recommended the Part 1 application.
And because of the 1987 alterations. So how unusual is that contradiction from the Park Service?
It's not terribly unusual. No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. It happens, but it does not happen frequently. The last one that I can think of that was like this, that was a tax credit project similar to this, was the Hotel Maryland. And that in Minneapolis, that dates back to, I want to say 2012, 2013.
Well, and one of their big things is the interior space does not reflect the its industrial use. But it just seems there's a lot of projects or a lot of historic buildings that interior-wise also do not reflect, doing because of restoration or reuse, are used for completely other purposes. So I'm not quite sure where they're coming from on that.
Yes, generally speaking, what the National Park Service is looking for on the interior, and we must make a distinction between buildings in a historic district and buildings that are being nominated individually. The standard is a bit higher for buildings that are being nominated individually. The National Park Service generally wants to see some of those interior finishes, especially like in common spaces. They would like to see some of those historic pieces there. And it sounds like their interpretation with this one is that they just don't see enough historic features and materials.
All right, I just have one final comment, then I'll be quiet. So how is this application different than the original? I mean, why are we thinking that this is going to pass muster while the other one didn't?
Well, according to the Code of Federal Regulations, if a tax credit, if you have a Part 1 that is rejected by the National Park Service, then the appeals process is to write a formal National Register nomination and submit that to the State Review Board for its review and its comment and its vote.
Okay.
Can I add a bit of extra information in there too? This is Rachel Peterson.
Yes.
So I think part of the issue with the Part 1 nomination is that we maybe we're a little bit less specific than we should have been about how much of the building was demolished in 1987. So that part of the nomination was beefed up with some extra text and extra images to really clarify and explain how much and where and what part of the building was demolished outside the period of significance. So that that part has changed between the Part 1 and the National Register nomination.
Rachel, were you the author for the Part 1 too then?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
This is Amy Song, and I've got two questions that I'm tracking here. Philip has lost audio. Okay, I'm gonna.
I'm back.
Okay, Philip, do you want to go with your question, and then I'll do the second one after.
Sure. So this is Board Member Koski. I have a question about the interior condition. It seems like the National Park Service has a concern about not being able to see the original integrity of those spaces because they've been covered up. So my question is, to what degree could the argument be made that the residential adaptive reuse is reversible, and that if you took out the partition walls and the interior residential finishes, couldn't you get back to the original condition, and wouldn't that support the integrity argument?
Board Member Koski, that argument is often put into National Register nominations and Part 1s. That being said, the National Park Service, they're going to interpret the building as they find it today, not as it may appear at some future date or may not appear at some future date. So they're going to go by how they see it today.
So then maybe a follow-up question, getting more philosophical. If they were going to review the Sears building, the Midtown Global Market today, which is now offices and residential units and a market hall, would they support that listing?
Well, I can't really speak for that, if they would or they wouldn't, but I will say that the standards of yesterday are not quite what the standards of today are.
And by standards of yesterday, you mean 10 years ago or 15 years ago?
Yes, yes.
Understood.
This is Amy Spong. The other thing to think about is, we've seen today a lot of adaptive reuse projects in these types of industrial buildings that have been approved for tax credits because they've met the standards. So when you get approved for those tax credit projects, they meet the standards. The adaptive reuse in the 1980, I forget the exact date for this particular building, wasn't a tax credit project. Is that correct? In the 1980s, so there was no review of that adaptive reuse project to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards at that time.
This is Board Member White. I love the history in this. Again, some of the economic impact of what it did for Minneapolis and actually beyond, maybe a regional or national impact. And I've listened to the comments, and so Dennis or Amy or Rachel. So does that mean today, as we're reviewing this, there is a potential for this to be, first of all, placed on the, if approved, the National Register, and then secondly, to receive the tax credit?
Yes, Board Member White, that's what we're considering today. That's what the board is considering today. Does it wish to forward the nomination to the National Park Service, and the National Park Service, would reconsider if it chose to do that? Would they indeed reconsider? And if they would reconsider, then of course, the tax credits would then become available.
Thank you.
And I do have a question, which I think I myself was wondering the same thing. Board Member Levasseur is asking if that is snow in the third floor photos. No.
No.
I didn't think it was snow, but.
So is that some sort of installation?
I think there's a photo. Let me go back, see if I can see the photo.
I think you called it was the fermentation. It was the fermentation. Yeah, that one.
Okay, there we go.
This is Rachel. Yes, that's loose insulation on the floor.
Oh, okay. You might want to say something about that in your text, because it looks like it's got a real problem with insulation there or something.
Sure.
This is Board Member Solomonson, and I just want to say I think that it's a very well constructed argument about the history of the building, connecting the design of the building with advertising and with the status of baking at the time. So it all pulls together just beautifully, and I thought it was fabulous.
Board Member Olson has a question as well.
So if this is a tax credit project, does that mean that the third floor would be subject to SHPO review for that project, or is the tax credit not imply a rehab project?
SHPO would review the entire thing, the entire structure, the entire building.
And this is Amy Spong. So that would be a tax credit application process, which is separate from the National Register nomination process, as you all probably know. But that program, our tax program, is done in partnership with the National Park Service. So the Park Service ultimately has final approval over tax credit applications. But one of the requirements to become eligible for tax credits is that the building be considered eligible for or listed on the National Register.
Board Member Koski. Do you have a question?
Question, and I apologize if I did not see this in the packet, but are the windows on the primary elevation, Park Avenue, are those original windows?
Rachel, would you be able to answer that one?
Those were replacements. They reflect the the paint arrangement and the design of the original windows, but they were put in after the 1987 redevelopment, but in that period.
And this is Board Member Koski again. What is the material of those windows? Are they painted metal windows, painted wood, vinyl?
I believe they're painted metal, but you're testing my memory a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I'd like to say something as Board Member Stark. The bones, again, of this building are solid. If I was to approach this as an architect to redevelop it for whatever it would be, whatever the developer wants to do with it, I think the stuff that's on the first floor and second floor, if they're going to remodel it, could be brought back and make everyone happy with this process. If this was not done, if it did not get the tax credit, which it would need for this building to be successful, I think there's a chance this building would be lost and the neighborhood along Park Avenue there would lose part of its history when we've lost so much of it. So I think it deserves a chance and see what can happen to it.
Agreed, definitely.
Any other questions?
This is Board Member Warner. Just more of a comment. I was wondering if basically we've got this great story of this sanitary bakery and the whole industrial aspect of manufactured bread. Are there any similar factories like this still in existence in as good a shape?
I think there's one on Lake Street, isn't there? That came up a few years ago. It was a bakery.
I'm sorry, Board Member Warner. Nothing's immediately jumping out at me. I don't know if Hess-Royce discovered anything during the course of their research.
Dennis.
This is Rachel. I'll just jump in quick. We did do some looking into comparative buildings and didn't find anything that had as good of integrity as this or that fit into the same kind of vein in the context of industrial baking.
Is that an additional argument that could be made to beef up this National Register and to really make the argument to the National Park Service?
It would seem to me if there's information to that effect, that would likely strengthen the National Register nomination.
And this is Rachel again. We did include some of that on section 8, page 12, but it's just a paragraph or so that could be enhanced.
Any further discussion?
Yes, Chairman Stark, this is John Decker.
Yes.
You know, you look at the National Register criteria A, and that basically speaks about how we should vote. So that's my comment.
Thank you, John. Any other discussion? If not, we'll go to seek a motion.
This is Board Member Koski. I would like to move that we advance this to the National Park Service for reconsideration and support the nomination.
This is Board Member Solomonson. I'd like to second.
Thank you, Board Members Solomson and Koski. Moving to a vote. Again, going through my list here, John, myself, I vote yes. Board Member Koski?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Board Member, oh, she's not here. Board Member Elliott?
Yes.
Board Member Andrea?
Yes.
Board Member Rob?
Yes.
Board Member Chris?
Yes.
Board Member Frank?
Yes.
Board Member Lindsay?
Yes.
Board Member Steve?
Yes.
Board Member John Decker?
Aye.
Board Member Mary?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and continue then.
Yes, please.
This is the Farmers Union Grain Terminal Association headquarters in Falcon Heights, Ramsey County. The authors are Laurel Fritz and Lauren Anderson of New History. The Farmers Union Grain Terminal Association headquarters marks the southwest corner of the intersection of Snelling Avenue North and Larpenteur Avenue West. Here we are looking at the chamfered northeast facade. Our view is to the southwest. Here is an overhead showing the boundaries of the property. And so you can see the boundaries as the red line there at the southwestern corner of the intersection of Larpenteur and Snelling. The building had two primary construction phases, 1947 and 1957. The main section was, with its corresponding lab garage building, was built in 1947 with a large west wing erected in 1957. The lab garage building, which was originally 2 stories on its north end and 1 story at the south, received a 2nd-story addition over its south section in 1977. The Farmers Union Grain Terminal Association was established in 1938 as a collection of largely Midwestern grain marketing cooperatives. The V-shaped building they chose to erect as their headquarters in Falcon Heights was eye-catching, reflecting the modern style. Modern was an architecture that bridged the gap between the traditional and the modern. Traditionalists embraced the eclectic of earlier years, whereas modernists wished to do away with the historical references and focus on what some described as a pure and functional form. As a result, modern buildings are less embellished than traditional architecture. The modern style was largely vernacular and sought an impression that was more playful than modern, but less garish than many of the traditional works. It was a mix of historical references and futuristic imagery, and it became very popular. And at the top left, we're looking again at that northeast chamfered facade and also the east elevation. Our view there is to the southwest. And then at lower left, another view of the east elevation, but we're looking to the northwest at that point. And then the top right, we have the long north elevation showing both the east and west wings. The view there is to the southeast. And then at lower right, the connection point between the 1947 east wing and the 1957 west wing. The view is to the south. The photo at left shows the entire north elevation, including that of the lab garage building. Again, the view there is to the east. At right is the east and north elevation of the lab garage building, and the view there is to the southwest. At left, we're looking at the south elevation of the 1957 wing, and our view is to the north. At right, we're looking at the west and south elevations of the office building. The view is to the northeast. Both of these views show details of the facade, including the piers, which are absent capitals, a characteristic of modern. At left, we see the bas relief crowning the building, and at right are decorative metal panels on the facade. Both present an agricultural theme. Two circa 1948 views from the St. Paul Pioneer Press. Some interior views. At left is the first level lobby. Our view there is to the northwest. And at right is the fourth level lobby. The view there is to the south. At left, we're looking southeast at a first level corridor. The 1947 image at right is from Co-op Grain Quarterly. Note the elevators and walls. The circa 1955 image at left shows office space and employees. It is from the publication Welcome to the GTA. At right is a present day view of the office space. At upper left is a southeast view of the kitchen, and lower middle is the kitchen in 1947. The image is from Co-op Grain Quarterly. At top right is a southeast view of the buffet in the third level cafeteria. Both views are of the building's lower level auditorium in the 1957 wing. At left is an east view, and at right is a west view. The period of significance is 1947 and 1957. The level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is C, and the area of significance is architecture. The period of significance is 2 years, 1947 and 57. While most of the building was completed in 1947, the West Wing would not be built until a decade later. The Farmers Union Grain Terminal Association headquarters is an excellent example of modern architecture, a style that marked a midpoint between the traditional and the modern. The building ornamenting the southwest corner of the intersection of Snelling and Larpenteur is eligible for listing in the National Register, and we do not have any correspondence on this.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. And also thank you for sending along those PDFs of the current pictures that weren't in our original submittals at PAX that we got. I want to be sure everybody was able to see those and look through them prior to our meeting. I think most of these photos here are the ones that were included in that. This is one of those buildings that everybody who goes to the State Fair sees. It's either go left or one direction or the other, and this is right on the corner, and you usually sit at the stop sign for a long time and admire the building. So are there any public comments? Philip, do you have a question?
This is Board Member Koski. I have a comment and then a question. I think this is a remarkably intact, modern structure. I think from an integrity standpoint, it's one of the best that we've reviewed as long as I've been on the board. In the nomination form, here's my question. Under current functions, it's simply listed as work in progress. I'm wondering what that means.
Tamara, would you like to answer that? Or excuse me, Laurel or Lauren?
I mean, we're all here.
Okay.
This is Lauren Anderson. I can speak to that. Yeah, this is a historic rehabilitation tax credit project, and a Part 2 was recently submitted to NPS. It's being proposed for conversion to housing.
Oh.
Thank you.
Anything else, Philip?
That's it.
Okay. Steve has a question.
Well, I wonder if I could be part of the motion to advance it as a grain farmer who has sold grain to Harvest States.
Wow.
We'll get right on that.
Your name can be on one of the bathroom tiles in here.
And this is Amy Spong. I just want to, for the purposes of the recording and the minutes, we do have comments from board member James. Beautiful historic photos. Board member Solomonson, impressive research and great photos. And board member Dyer agreed research on this was exceptional. And board member Warner, amazing continuity of history over time as well as building integrity. So thanks all for adding those comments in. We'll make sure they're part of the record.
Thanks, Amy.
And then I think, yes, board member Olson, we did get your question, I believe.
Board member Schulke, I'd just like to comment, this is one of the most complete nominations I've read. I really enjoyed the discussion or the history about the, modern Art Deco style, and, especially when their comment about the call for kind of a pure and functional architecture, which comes to mind of calls in recent months for a national architecture. I thought that kind of hit home.
And board member Kate has written something well-constructed argument about significance as well.
And could I add something? This is board member Kate again. Stylistic terminology is just notoriously slippery. And this was such a well-constructed argument about why this particular style was chosen, how it was connected with the aims of the organization, and it laid out a really complex history of deco, modern, streamlining, and so on in a way that I would just love to have my students read.
Thank you, board member Kate. I agree. As a board member, my comments too, I loved reading this. I own, as you know, an old Studebaker, which I considered as streamlined and kind of fits in. It just a very interesting style, and this is such a big building and so late that to have it there was there. My one concern about the interior, they kind of brushed off what's gone on with the existing, and having just discussed this on the interior being changed, this one, it seems more surface, that it's painted and carpets and ceilings are gone. The plaster ceiling with acoustic tile is now suspended acoustic stuff. I'm sure that in the part two, that is something that'll all get reviewed by the National Park Service and SHPO. So it's easy to bring this back, and what they can do with this building is what they can do with the bread building too. So there's hope here. The additions on here also seem to be very well tied in. The garage and the second floor in the 1957 edition is just nice to see these details put together. Any other board members? Discussions, questions? If not, we'll look for a nomination or a motion.
This is Steve. I'd like to make a motion that we advance the nomination.
Thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
This is board member Decker, and I second it.
We have a motion and a second. We will move to a vote. Board member John Stark, yes. Board member Phillip.
Aye.
Board member Kristen, nope, she's gone. Board member Kate.
Yes.
Board member Elliott.
Yes.
Board member Andrea. Yes. Is board member Andrea still there?
Yes.
Yes. Board Member Rob?
Yes.
Board Member Chris?
Yes.
Board Member Frank?
Yes.
Board Member Lindsay?
Yes.
Board Member Steve?
Aye.
Board Member John Decker?
Aye.
Board Member Mary?
Yes.
Thank you. This passes. On to you, Dennis.
Actually, Dennis, before you jump in, this is Amy Spong. I just want to thank everyone. We're on our last item. It's been a really long meeting. You've all been incredibly patient. And I just wanted to say kind of anecdotally that I think this is maybe a little fitting that we're ending on the Hope Engine Company number 3 tonight. I don't know if any of you have been tracking any of the news, but the use for this building is called now the Hope Breakfast Bar, and they were featured on national CBS News just a day or two ago about what they are doing in response to the pandemic, and they have basically run out of money as their business, but they are now they've switched gears. They've been serving about 500 free meals daily to the community, and they are now basically operating solely on donations and volunteer drivers. And if you get a chance to look up the CBS National News, catch the story. I think it's just, we didn't know that it was going to be last on the agenda. Well, it was planned last on the agenda, but obviously we didn't know this was all going to play out that way. So I just wanted to put a shout out and to thank everyone for hanging in there with us. I know it's been a long meeting.
Okay, so this is the Hope Engine Company number 3, St. Paul, Ramsey County. The authors, Tamara Hallison-Lute of New History. Hope Engine Company number 3 is a 2-story rectangular building with a flat roof. And here we're looking at the east facade. Our view is to the west. The building is located at 1 South Leach Street in St. Paul, a block west of bustling 7th Street, also known as Minnesota Highway 5, and near the large medical complex of Children's Hospital and Clinics of Minnesota. The framed building is sheathed in brick and reflects a restrained Italianate style. Round arch window openings with hoods punctuate the east facade and north side, while the south side features many segmental arched window openings. Vertical brickwork at the east facade and north and south sides implies pilasters. Brickwork, somewhat reminiscent of corbelling, defines the cornice at the east facade and north side. The thin cornice is only partial at the south side. A blank panel over the east facade's central second-story window resembles a banner. The west rear of the building is unadorned with a single entry. And at left, we're looking at the east facade and north side. Our view is to the southwest. And at center, we're looking at the north side. The view is to the south. And at right, we're looking at the south side. Our view there is to the northwest. The interior is largely open space with a concrete floor and wood beadboard ceiling. Trim and casework is wood and the walls are plaster. A stairway to the second floor is adjacent to the south wall. At the time of photography, the firehouse was in the process of being converted into a restaurant, employing the federal and state tax credits for historic rehabilitation. At left is a southeast section of the interior depicting the staircase and entry door with newly installed bar at left. The view there is to the southeast. And at right is the long view through the building with the bar in the foreground. Note the wood beadboard ceiling. The view is to the west. The east part of the second floor is open space, while the west part features divided space, including a bunk room, small office, and bathroom. The floor is wood and walls are plaster. The plaster ceiling is gone and the wood joists are exposed. At left, we're looking at the wood stairway and balustrade near the south wall. The view is to the south. And at right is the east half of the second floor. The view is to the east. Erected by the city of St. Paul in 1872, the firehouse was home to Hope Engine Company Number 3, a volunteer fire department. St. Paul was growing rapidly in the late 1800s, and there was considerable balloon frame and construction. Not surprisingly, with so many wood buildings heated by stoves and fireplaces, fire was a continuous issue. The city of St. Paul even issued an ordinance that building owners maintain 2 fire buckets. Public officials, newspapers, and others urged the creation of cisterns and the formation of formal fire departments, the earliest of which being volunteer forces, like Hope Engine Company Number 3. By 1877, however, 5 years after the construction of the firehouse on South Leach Street, the city transitioned to a paid fire department, and the station became occupied by St. Paul Fire Department Engine Company Number 3. Through roughly the first 50 years of its existence, the fire station housed on-duty firefighters and their steam engines. As the engines were extremely heavy, they were pulled by horse teams, which also were housed at the station. By 1923, however, the city had transitioned to automotive engines, and the steam engines and horses were no longer necessary. Motorized fire trucks were a far more efficient means of fighting fires, traveling faster and reaching farther than the steam engine team combination ever could. The transition forced changes to old firehouses, as stables were eliminated and station entrances altered to accommodate the fire trucks. By 1933, a report noted that the Hope Engine Company Number 3 building was in need of repairs. A photo 3 years later revealed that the fire bell tower had been removed, along with decorative posts sprouting along the roofline that resembled rectangular-like bollards. Soon thereafter, the station parapet was removed, likely about 1940, when the St. Paul Fire Department received Public Works Administration funds to repair and renovate its older firehouses. The fire department's annual report for 1940 explained that several stations had been reconditioned and that, quote, considerable remodeling was done to Fire Station Number 3, unquote. It was at this time that Station Number 3 had its vehicular entrance modified to more readily handle fire trucks. The period of significance is 1872 to 1940. The level of significance is local, and National Register criterion is A. Areas of significance, politics, government, and community planning and development. The period of significance for Hope Engine Company Number 3 begins in 1872 with the construction of the fire station and ends in 1940 when the firehouse was altered to accommodate the increasing size of fire engines. The alteration allowed the old firehouse to continue in operation until 1965. The smallest rectangular building at 1 South Leach Street is the oldest fire station in St. Paul. It was built by the city as a necessary response to the growing fire problem in the city. It also was built at a time when fires were addressed by a steam engine pulled by teams. So it has the unique distinction of reflecting 2 eras, that of the steam engine and team and that of the motorized fire truck. It is one of the few fire stations in the Twin Cities reflecting this evolution. Hope Engine Company Number 3 is eligible for listing in the National Register. And we do have one piece of correspondence with this. The correspondence is dated February 18th, 2020. It's from George Gauss, Historic Preservation Supervisor, writing on behalf of the St. Paul Heritage Preservation Commission, which is acting on behalf of Mayor Melvin Carter. And they support the nomination of Hope Engine Number 3. Hope Engine House Number 3 to the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you, Dennis. I believe this is the building that was saved from being torn down for expanding that development that was built right next to it, and the HPC added it to St. Paul. Is that correct?
It is. It is correct. It's
we do have some comments here. Mary Warner wrote, fascinating fire department history in this nomination, and Kate said, this is another good example of linking social and architectural history very effectively. Are there any comments or discussions from the public? If not, board members, I see Frank might have popped up here. Do you have a question?
I don't have a question. I have a comment. And
Okay.
you mentioned this. This is special to me. My grandfather's brother was one of the first black firemen in St. Paul.
Wow.
But the story of this building, and you talked about the fight, it was tremendous that the community really stood up and saved this building. And that is extremely special. And Amy, I don't know if you remember this. I think you reached out to me some time ago in an attempt to save a barbershop on Central Avenue in St. Paul, which was historic in the Rondo neighborhood. And it just, for all of us, and in different meetings, we've all talked about this, it's so important, again, to save some of those things that really reflect our history. And this one was not only a great story about the St. Paul Fire Department and that type of thing, so it also was special to me for a couple of reasons, because so many things in the Rondo neighborhood have been lost, and maybe because we just haven't stood up and fought the fight to save them. So I don't want to digress, but I thought I would mention that this was a great fight here. And Amy, I don't know if you remember that you had reached out to me one time, and I think we actually took a visit there. But
I do remember that well, Frank. Yes.
Fascinating, Frank. Thank you for sharing. I'm fascinated as a little kid who wanted to be a fireman, as a lot of little boys and girls, I think, wanted to do, the history of fire trucks and horse-drawn, and the fact that this was remodeled because the horses were in back or something like that, and they had to change it to make it faster and more efficient to get out of there. Those were great stories that were written in here. Tamara wrote, Board Member White, was your uncle a member of Fire Station 10?
I don't remember that, but if that was the particular fire station that was primarily African American, then I would say yes.
It was. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Board Member Decker, are there future plans for the restoration of the second floor?
Tamara, can you?
Yeah, this is Tamara Lute. There is a desire to use the second floor to support the Hope Breakfast Bar. That, as Amy noted in the beginning of the presentation of this nomination, that looks a little different right now than it did, a month ago. But that is certainly the goal, is to be able to restore that large open space to have it support additional seating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It looks like we have Board Member Olson with a question, and Board Member Schulke would like to thank Board Member White for adding that history.
So my question is related to the description of the volunteer firefighters, that they got relief from jury duty and from polling taxes and from road work. And as a civil engineer, I'm interested, were the residents of St. Paul required to do road work if called upon by the city?
As I understood the research in the early days of St. Paul, in the same way that before we had volunteer fire departments, the residents were called upon to keep a bucket and put out any fires. Residents were called on to do a lot until we had more formalized systems to support the city's growth. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other discussion? If not, we'll move for a motion.
So moved.
Is that Frank who said that?
Board Member White, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Sorry. Okay, thank you, Frank. Move. Is there a second?
Second, Board Member Solomonson.
Thank you, Board Member Solomonson. We will move to a vote. Board Member John Stark, yes. Board Member Phillip?
Aye.
Board Member Kristen is out. Board Member Kate?
Yes.
Board Member Elliott?
Yes.
Board Member Andrea?
Yes.
Board Member Rob?
Yes.
Board Member Chris?
Yes.
Board Member Frank?
Yes.
Board Member Lindsay?
Yes.
Board Member Steve?
Aye.
Board Member John Decker?
Aye.
Board Member Mary?
Yes.
And I think Board Member John Decker gets the most positive votes in the whole night here. This passes tonight. So thank you, everybody. Are there any other comments from SHPOs or anything for tonight?
Just to make sure that we do a motion to adjourn.
That was the next step I was going to. Can I have a motion to adjourn? And if I remember my training on Robert's Rules of Order from Philip Koski, you only need a motion, you don't need a second, and you're done. Is that correct, Philip?
I move we adjourn.
All right.
We are adjourned. Thank you. And for our chair, Kristen Anderson, we are adjourning at 8:47. She can keep all the
Thanks, guys.
quarters. Thank you.